we've heard that Mossad was able to actually, set up a cell within the country. How was it that Mossad was able to do that without the Iranian government taking note or noticing something was up?
I mean, the Iranian government has been engaged in attempting to break up these Mossad cells for a while, but they haven't been the priority. The priority has mainly been internal dissent and concerns about if they could overthrow the government from inside. Not necessarily Israel, but just regular Iranians. And that's been a point of concern for a very long time. And additionally, the ring around their own intelligence circles is not as secure as even some of their allies were. This has not been possible in Yemen, for instance, who keep an extraordinarily tight circle around themselves. Hamas also has not been able to protect itself against such a thing. The killings of their commanders and leaders happened over a much longer period of time throughout the grind of the genocide. But Hezbollah and Iran, I think, believed in their own deterrent capability so much that they didn't anticipate that this would happen to them. But it happened with Hezbollah, with the mass killing of their military leadership, and now it's happened in Iran. And now they've become aware of it, but to some degree, it's too late. They already have this network operating inside their country, inside their own capital city.
You mentioned about, is it President Pezeshkian? Pezeshkian, right? And the Ayatollah. Tell us, who is in charge? Because that's also something that a lot of people outside Iran don't actually understand. Who is in charge? And who is now in charge?
Well, the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, has ultimate decision-making capability. It keeps the system from going too far in either direction, but the country absolutely changes the direction that it takes with the world, and internally as well, depending on what president there is. Under the last reformist president, Khatami, there was a significant opening of the media laws of the country, of freedom of speech, of its economic policy. And under Pezeshkian, there was an attempt to do a smaller version of that, but it was absolutely noticeable. You'll see in a lot of videos in Iran that the rigid enforcement of the hijab is no longer as rigid as it used to be. There are a lot of women who don't feel free that they don't have to wear it anymore because they know the police won't get to them. And I don't think that if Pezeshkian's opponent in the last election, Saeed Jalili, a much more anti-diplomatic candidate, if he had won, that these talks would have occurred in the first place. They have to go with the president can change that policy. It can change a lot of things, even if there is a final approval as such by the supreme leader.
Right. So we can take it for granted that the president is in charge, pretty much.
More or less, generally speaking, yes.
Okay. I'll come back to that liberalism because I'm glad you mentioned that, but I'll come back to it later about the women and the wearing of the hijab and, of course, some of the protests that we had seen before. Right now, so we heard that Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordo were struck. Key nodes, these are key nodes in Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Israeli officials claim that the strike significantly set uranium back. What do you think?
I mean, IRGC officers, Major General Mohsen Rezai said yesterday that the enriched uranium had been moved out of these facilities months ago.
Including Fordo?
He said all facilities.
Right.
So I have to assume Fordo. I'm unsure if I believe that, mainly because there was reports of at least some radiation, abnormal amounts of radiation at Natanz after it was struck. But to the extent that it is a severe setback, I don't think that's the case. I think it definitely has set back its process months, undoubtedly. I mean, these are massive regular strikes that are happening, even if they're only affecting the above ground facilities. The main threat to Iran's nuclear program is if America enters the war and is able to utilize bunker busters, which Israel doesn't have, which have to fly in planes that Israel doesn't have and America won't sell them. Or if, God forbid, they use a tactical nuclear weapon, which is something that Trump has been apparently, something that was fielded to him by strategists around him. If that is the case, then Iran's nuclear program will absolutely have a very severe setback. But we're not at that stage, at least not yet.
The IAEA has been out defending themselves, saying, look, nobody can say, our qualification, or at least our summation of how the inspection is going with Iran is no justification for war. There's a soundbite of the IAEA that I'd like to play for you. Is it not ready? Okay. All right. Apparently it's not ready, but let's just move on. It's the boss has been it was on CNN, it was on Al Jazeera, and it's saying, don't hold us responsible for it. We are neutral. We are, our job is as inspectors, we check, we write reports, etc. However, what they don't say is that the IAEA has several countries' representation on the group, right? So, which brings us to, before I even go to Iran, because we very quickly run out of time here, Monakai Vanunu told the world that Israel has nuclear weapons. Israel has never admitted to having nuclear weapons, yet the IAEA has never said anything about Israel's nuclear weapons. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think is going on?
I mean, continuous accusations from the Iranians that the IAEA is a pro-Western institution, that its leader, Rafael Grossi, who is an Italian, has been consistently biased against the state, seeing transgressions where there aren't, and so on and so forth. I mean, it goes back to the failures of the international treaty system. Iran is a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which means that it can't build nuclear weapons, and it is held to that the entirety of its existence. It is allowed to enrich uranium for civilian reasons, and it has continuously done so. Even in the CIA's own assessments of the situation, and you can debate the validity of those all you want, even in those assessments, it says it stopped any kind of weaponized nuclear program in the early 2000s. So Israel, by virtue of not being in the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, it can exist outside of those confines. But because it is a Western country, a bulwark of Western civilization in the Middle East, it can then say, well, of course, we need to be active in all these international institutions, even if we are not held to that. It's the same impunity that exists in everything that Israel does. So even though it doesn't hold itself to any nuclear restrictions, it feels that it has the right to influence the IAEA, to try to give its perspective into that organization, even if it will never allow inspectors in or any declaration, public or otherwise, of its pretty significant nuclear capabilities. It's impunity, plain and simple. And it's something that is allowed for by the rest of the Western world because there is no advantage to admitting that Israel has these capabilities in public.
And this is the thing. You mentioned impunity, and it's a word that has come up over and I mean, it must be one of the most repeated words in the last 2 years. And that impunity appears to have taken the world into a place where, even as a human rights activist, even as a human being that respects dignity to other human beings, you find yourself questioning when things happen and you don't respond the way you should, as a person to it. How damaging is Israel's impunity? How damaging is it to the world order?
I think it's incredibly damaging. I mean, when Chancellor Merz of Germany is speaking about how Israel is doing its dirty work in Iran, what he is saying there is fairly clear. It is removing all of these pesky laws of wars that the Western countries used to have to pretend that they at least pretend that they were abiding by, and that lays open for the future any level of conduct from any Western army against its enemies. It allows for the removal of any sort of liberal obligation toward humanitarian intervention, if that was ever a real obligation to begin with. It allows for the total trampling of sovereignty all over the global south, all over the third world. It is that the genocide that has happened in Gaza is it's the opening salvo. It is the opening strike against every single rule that the West may have had on its books before. And this is a fundamentally good thing for them, because then they don't have to care. They can kill, they can maim, and there doesn't need to be this PR machine necessarily behind it.